We begin tonight with exclusive new reporting from NBC News that President Trump has for months, been urging his administration to reinstate a large-scale family separation policy at the border. That is according to 3 U.S. officials with knowledge of meetings at the White House. And now a major impediment to Mr. Trump reinstating that policy, which, by the way, was an unmitigated political disaster for the White House last year, is gone. Secretary Nielsen is out at DHS. So is nearly everyone else at DHS. But more on that in a moment. And Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, who resigned yesterday, wasn't merely opposed to another round of family separations. The New York Times reports that the president wanted her to close ports of entry and to stop accepting asylum seekers, too. But she refused. And yet you could still argue that she's been the most aggressive Homeland Security chief in the department's history to crack down on immigration. But that apparently was not enough for the president. Her dismissal comes as the administration is scrambling to address a surge of migrant families at the border as the president begins to ramp up his 2020 campaign with immigration as a major focus. But before we talk about the politics, which we will, don't worry, we should not lose sight of how the agency that was designed to prevent another 9/11 style attack is an absolute mess under this president. When Nielsen leaves on Wednesday, there will be no confirmed secretary at the agency, no confirmed CBP commissioner. There is no confirmed deputy secretary. The president is considering removing the acting deputy secretary, according to 3 administration officials. There is no confirmed head of ICE, no confirmed inspector general, no confirmed FEMA administrator. And this afternoon, the head of Secret Service, which operates under DHS, resigned under pressure. To get into all of that, let's bring in Julia Ainsley, our national security and justice reporter with NBC News. She broke the big story about the president's renewed push on family separations. Jacob Soboroff is an NBC correspondent who was on the family separation story pretty much before anyone else. And John Sandweg was the acting director for U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement under President Obama. So, Julia, was Nielsen dismissed, partially at least, because the president wants more families to be separated?
Yeah, that's right. So basically, Katie, what we're told is that starting in January, when the president saw the numbers start to increase of undocumented immigrants coming across the border, he wanted really strong policies to come out all of a sudden. And what he had in his back pocket from the summer was the policy of separating families. And Nielsen said, no, you can't do that. She didn't oppose it on moral grounds. She opposed it on legal and logistical grounds. They didn't have the space to hold people if they were going to start separating and detaining people in mass scale. They were going to have to get around court decisions that say that you have to reunify the families who separated. And the president would have to undo his own executive action that ended family separation last summer. So for all of these reasons she laid out, it didn't make sense, but she went in another number of other routes. We know she increased the number of border agents that were at the border to enforce border operations. We know that she even proposed legislation that would allow CBP to deport children more quickly. We know that she was able to try to send more asylum seekers back into Mexico to wait. It's not like she was a softliner on immigration by any stretch of the imagination. However, her predecessor, Kevin McAleenan, is willing to go a little further than she was. And that is why we understand that he was more ingratiated with this White House than she was, and what led to her ousting yesterday. What we understand about McAleenan is that he sees a way around this. He thinks family separation should still be on the table as an option if you can give parents a choice between being detained with their children for long periods of time or separating.
So wait, hold on. Does that mean that you can get around the legal hurdles here? Because, Julia, you just laid out your reporting, but it bears repeating. Federal court orders prohibit the Department of Homeland Security from reinstating the policy. And again, it would be reversing his own executive order. So does McAleenan believe that giving parents this choice would get around those court orders? Or does the president want somebody in charge of DHS who will break the law?
Well, I think whatever they do, it would be definitely a suit. I think you could bring another class action lawsuit. But I can tell you that the legal very small route that they're trying to take here, and that this summer, the judge overseeing the case had said that all of these children had to be reunified. He said, okay, you can go ahead and hold children for longer than 20 days, which was in defiance of another court order, if it means reunifying them. It's what they had to do to be able to hold parents in one place, to be able to match them with their children before they were deported. Jacob and I remember covering this up and down, and the judge agreed to that for the purpose of reunification. And now it seems the Trump administration might be trying to use that logic to say, look, the ACLU was on board with this. This judge who was calling for family reunifications was on board for this. So let's hold families together, and they have the choice between being apart or being held indefinitely. But that doesn't change the fact that there's already this other settlement, the Flores settlement, that is carried on for almost 2 decades now, over 2 decades, that says you cannot hold children longer than 20 days. So I think you would see those two judges' decisions clashing together here, Katie, and it's not a path that Nielsen wanted to take. It's not a route she wanted to go down, but it's one McAleenan thinks is worth exploring.
John, in your experience out there, what family members, what parents would choose to be separated from their kids?
I mean, I can't believe that we would ever get to the point where we're forcing parents to make this kind of decision. You have to remember that in that same court case, it just came out that there are still children who are separated from their parents. This was done the policy itself was so cruel, but then the way it was implemented was so poorly executed, where we didn't know where the parents were, we didn't know where the children were. The thought that we would even return to this is appalling to me. And then when you look at the numbers at the border, it didn't have an impact. There's no evidence at all that it deterred any individuals from coming. We've talked about this a lot on the show, that there's a simple way of dealing with this problem. Flood the zone with the rule of law, put in place the resources to process these cases quickly, and don't do things like cut off aid to Central America, where, you know, those push factors continue to drive people to make this arduous journey north. I just hope that this reporting, you know, that the cooler heads prevail here and the administration does what it should do, which is enforce the current laws.
Jacob, according to Julia's reporting, the president believes that this is the most effective deterrence policy. John says there's no evidence that it worked, and that's what the numbers say as well, that they were basically, the numbers for arrests for those crossing the border were basically unchanged between May and June of 2018 while this separation policy was in place. What did you see while you were down there?
Yeah, it's absurd, actually, Katie, to think that rebooting the family separation policy would be an effective deterrent. I was just watching the footage that you had up on the screen when John was speaking. I was there that day inside the McAllen Border Patrol processing station, and I saw what it looks like to take mothers and fathers away from their babies and put them on the floor under Mylar blankets, watched by security contractors in a watchtower. I was in that room and on this very tour. This is handout footage from the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump knows that family separation is not an effective deterrent. President Trump knows that deterrence is not an effective strategy in general. The only thing that happened coming out of family separations is that more families, not that they stopped coming, but they went to more dangerous and deadly locations to cross into this country. And what was the result of that? The death of 2 young children, Felipe and Jacqueline.
John, what do you think of what's going on at the Department of Homeland Security right now? We just laid out a moment ago in the open to this show all of the various openings that are at the Department of Homeland Security. No acting or no confirmed directors of various parts of the agency. What does that do for the effectiveness of Homeland Security?
Well, it cuts off the head of the agency at a time when there's chaos at the border, right? We now have lost the secretary. That also, there's a cascading effect, Katie, too. It's not just the secretary; it's her senior staff who are now in jeopardy of being lost. Other reporting suggests that the general counsel of the department's going to be gone, and the USCIS director. And you're right, we have vacancies now. We just had the ICE director, so it becomes very hard for the agency leaders to lead, especially when the career staff are looking at them, wondering whether they have the favor of the president and how long they're actually going to be in that position. You couldn't imagine a worse time to do this than right now when the numbers are at their highest. And the only thing I want to flag quickly is I think we all need to not lose sight of the fact that DHS is more than border security. There are a lot of other critical responsibilities that we don't seem to be talking about, counterterrorism included, and cybersecurity as well.
Well, it used to be that the Department of Homeland Security, Pete Williams has been saying this on the air all day, when you went to the Department of Homeland Security, what you generally talked about was foreign terrorism. And
right.
Now all you're talking about is immigration.
Well, look, immigration is a big part of the portfolio, obviously, in border security, but that's exactly right. I mean, DHS plays a critical role in counterterrorism. Fortunately, Kevin McAleen is actually very sharp and very experienced in those issues coming from Customs, which plays a big role in the counterterrorism piece. But look, let's not also forget disaster response and recovery. We're coming up on hurricane season again. I mean, you couldn't think of a worse time to destabilize the department. I'm not sure the president has an understanding of how destabilizing these kind of moves are, especially when you take out 3 or 4, people in Senate-confirmed roles.
Our colleague here at NBC News, Jeff Bennett, caught up with Senator Ron Johnson, asked him about all of the issues at DHS. Here's what he said.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned of a growing void of leadership within the Department of Homeland Security, and this is a department that is charged with really trying to grapple with some of the most significant challenges facing this nation. So I'm concerned.
Julia, in your reporting, and Jacob, I'll give you a follow-up on this as well. Who's really in charge when it comes to immigration policy? Is it the president that's just flying by the seat of his pants or going with his gut? Or is it someone like Stephen Miller who now increasingly has his ear?
Yeah, it's increasingly the White House. It's taken out of the hands of people at DHS, the people who are on the grounds enforcing these policies. It's happening more and more in rooms at the White House. It's Stephen Miller. Jared Kushner is playing a very active role in immigration and who stays and goes at the Department of Homeland Security. I don't think we should underestimate him and how important it is in this entire administration to have an allegiance with Jared Kushner. That matters. And of course, it's the president himself. A lot of times people remind me Stephen Miller is successful because the president agrees with him. He might not be an ideologue, but he likes his policies. He likes that they're tough and that they really resonate with his base. That's why he's still there. It's not just that he has outmaneuvered everyone else. The president actually champions those policies and carries those out. So increasingly more, it's happening in a smaller and smaller circle. And if you're not part of that circle, or you disagree with it, or you say it cannot be done, you find yourself on the outside.
There is this idea out there that the president can be manipulated by people who talk to him last. Stephen Miller, who's an immigration hawk, but the reality is Donald Trump was that anti-immigration from the very day he started campaigning and talked about building the wall and Mexicans coming over the border being rapists. So Stephen Miller came to the campaign because the campaign was a soft landing spot for him, or a good place for him to spout his views and to grow aligned with a president who agreed with the very same thing. Jacob, at the time that the president rescinded this, he cited Melania, he cited Ivanka, he said that he didn't like it. What is the message that's being sent now?
Well, subsequently, by the way, Katie, officials inside the Trump administration, and particularly within DHS, said they very much regretted that the president signed that executive order because they felt like they were close to the policy goals that they're still pushing today, which is, number one, holding families in jail, in detention indefinitely until they get through the pendency of their immigration hearings, the idea of indefinite detention of migrant families. And the second one would be to turn around immediately young, undocumented, unaccompanied minor children immediately when they get here. There was definitely a feeling within the administration, and they communicated to us, even the folks that were on the ground, that they had regretted that it got to that point. And I just want to say real quick, you know better than anyone, you just mentioned the president, out of his own mouth, called Mexicans rapists and criminals on day one of his campaign. You do not hear the president of the United States talking about the number one source of undocumented immigration in this country, which is visa overstays of people largely from Asia. He focuses on people that are with brown skin, quite frankly, coming from the south of the border, and that is what he is obsessively fixated on. If this was really about looking at people that were coming into the country in an illegal manner, he would not be talking about this at all, quite frankly.
Jacob Soboroff, Julia Ainsley, John Sandwig, everyone, thank you very much.
Thanks, Katie.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Beat the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.